この一族の器の浅さを。
Hey YouTube, so the purpose of this video is to answer a question I've been hearing a lot lately, which rings true especially for a lot of new and free-to-play players, and that is, which 5-star characters do I get first? Now before anyone flames in the comments, I want to preface this by saying this is not the same thing as a tier list. Sure, you can just look at the old tier list I made and pick all the top tiers, but I want this list to focus on primarily adventure mode and what the best route is to climb as painless as possible. As someone who has all the characters, I can safely say that every single 5-star character has their use and none of them are useless. However, giving the advice and telling new players and free-to-play players to get every single 5-star is not practical. I guess you could say this is an adventure mode tier list. It is meant to get you as far as possible while attaining the least amount of 5-star characters, which should greatly benefit new and free-to-play players who may not have the opportunity to get every single 5-star. If you simply want to see a general tier list, you can refer to an old one I made. However, I plan on making an updated tier list where I go into every single character in greater detail and what their strengths and weaknesses are in all aspects of the game. So, this is my tier list in general order of what 5-star characters I think you should summon, but before I dive into this, I'll quickly explain what the different tiers mean. Keep in mind, the purpose of this list is to get you as far as possible in adventure mode while having to summon the least amount of times, since not all players have the luxury of getting a large sum of 5-star characters. S tiers are characters that you're going to be using 99 to 100% of the time. The first character in the row is the female costume of Cain, so don't be confused by that. A tier represents characters that I have found to be tremendously helpful early game due to their strong nuking skills with high crit rates. B tier are characters that you could do without but will eventually want to get as they provide some decent utility. C is saved for the mid to later parts of the game when you eventually run into bosses with penetration resistance. In order to get past those, you will likely need to get at least 1 or 2 of these characters since they all provide team penetration. And D represents characters that I don't think you'll need for the most part to progress in adventure mode. They're not bad by any means, but a lot of their strengths are already satisfied by the characters above them. So starting off with S tier, of course you have Cain, who is required to be in your party, but he also becomes one of the strongest characters in the game once he's fully upgraded, so no shock there that he's S tier. Alongside him is Yui, who is the only 5-star healer in the game. Her banner is available every weekend depending on your time zone, so she should be rather easy to get if you save up your rubies. Now that you have your main character and your healer, you're going to need some strong heavy hitters, which is what the A tier consists of. Both Kana and Artemis are archers who have a very strong nuking skill with a high crit rate, so either one or both will take you very far in the early stages of the game. If I had to pick one over the other, I would pick Kana, though I would say they're both stronger than Cain during the early stages due to their increased crit rate. Conversely, Odin is a very strong hitting mage whose skill also stuns the enemy, which provides the rest of your team a few seconds to heal and deal additional damage for the finishing blow. On my new account, I've been able to breeze through the first 500 stages fairly effortlessly with Odin and Artemis. Note you are going to have to invest a lot of resources into these characters if you want to maximize their damage output. Nothing comes free. The next tier is controversial to popular opinion. Lilith and Darklord are both top tiers generally, but I will explain why I didn't need them in the early to middle parts of the game. Although Lilith is one of the game's best magical DPS and debuffer, the majority of the bosses in the early stages only hit one target, so I found that against a boss immune to physical attacks, if I just picked any mage such as Odin and made her tanky enough, then you could still easily kill the boss as long as your healer can keep up. So I didn't have the need to get Lilith quite yet. Another reason why I love Odin above Lilith is because Odin's ultimate hits very hard and deals burst damage, while Lilith is the type of character to deal damage over time. Frankly speaking, you could opt to get Lilith instead of Odin and you'll be fine. I just like being able to burst down enemies quicker with Odin, and her stun that she provides helps my party out greatly. As for Dark Lord, she's probably the best buffer in the game, and her ultimate can deal a decent amount of damage, especially when compared to Lilith in the early stages of the game. So why do I think you can play the early game without her? For similar reasons, your magical DPS doesn't matter too much against bosses in the early game, assuming they're single target bosses, and your healer can easily keep up. Honestly, Odin's ult will likely do more damage than any other mages at this stage of the game, due to her ultimate having increased crit rate, which is very significant in Swordmaster's story. With these 7 top characters alone, you should be able to get through most of Adventure Mode up until the late 700s, where you begin to encounter bosses with penetration resistance. Kana is especially helpful against stages 700 and 720 if you do not have the Fire Cain costume. You'll begin to encounter more penetration resistant bosses after stage 760. You can counter this by equipping Cain with the Temple Knight armor set or a dragon set. However, that's often not enough, which leads me into the explanation of the C tier. These are characters that I feel you'll need if you want to defeat the later half of the 700s. These 3 characters, Aina, Athena, and Dark, all have a passive skill that provides the team an additional 15% penetration when maxed. Having 1 or even 2 of these characters will help you attain the penetration required in order to defeat stages 760 to 790 against those penetration resistant bosses. After the 700s, the easiest way to progress all the way to the 900s would be to build a stun lock team. If you don't know what that is, I created a video all about it here. To build this team, you will have to attain at least 4 out of the 6 stunners: Odin, Aina, Athena, Calicia, Lucifer, or Joanne. Now, I could continue on after stage 900, but I'll save that for a separate video since the focus of this video was to try and help newer players. I'll now finish off with explaining my choices for the D tier and why I feel these characters aren't exactly essential for climbing adventure mode. Starting off with Calicia, her only strength is her use for a stun lock team, though most other stunners are better than her. Stun locking is also not expected until really late in the game, so she's not very necessary for new players. Although Lucifer is a strong stunner who has some team utility, her role can easily be replaced by Odin, who provides a similar stun with much higher crit rates. Next is Belfagore, whose main role is to be used in slasher mode since her skills revolve around that. She does offer the team additional attack, but this can be substituted by Odin and Dark Lord. As for Ares, he is only useful in PvP due to his passive ability of blocking hits. Gaia and Cain are both useful archers that provide things like team crit rate and crit damage. However, someone like Artemis offers the same thing but with a stronger ultimate skill. Now, I love Vivian, however I must admit I never had the need to use her in adventure mode, besides for a few certain stages, though you will likely be able to pass them without her. Similarly to Gaia and Cain, Mary is a great DPS, however after the release of Kana, Mary has dropped down from being one of the best physical DPSs. And lastly is Joanne. She's a fantastic character due to her defensive utility and stun. However, this is not necessarily required for early on in the game if you have many of the characters in the top tiers already. I at least haven't needed her yet, however she is one of the best supports in the game. I hope my explanation of all this made sense. I try to think from the perspective of a new player that couldn't afford to summon characters impulsively. It's very important to allocate some of your rubies on things such as red scrolls to refine your gear, and additional stamina later on when you need to do more farming. With the little rubies you have left, it's important you don't waste them on 5-star summons that you don't necessarily need in order to progress in adventure mode. If you have any further questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments section below. This was not meant to be a full-on guide that solves your problems for every single stage. However, I am planning on releasing something like that in the future, so be on the lookout. I have made a second account that is slowly climbing and meant to be a free-to-play perspective, so please refer to those videos for some general tips. I will post them in the description below. If you stayed this long into the video, then please support me by subscribing and liking the video. It helps me tons and lets me know whether or not I'm doing a good job. Thanks again for watching everyone. I'll see you in the next one.